start the recording now. Everything from here on for the next 30 minutes or so will be sent to you in about 24 hours, anyone who registered for the class. So again, real quick, my name's Clay. Feel free to ask questions. All of the contact information to get a hold of me is up on your screen. Question tab is over on the right. Drop me an email or a quick phone call is completely fine also. Now, today's course, is listed on screen now, is meant to be a little bit informal, isn't exactly what we're going to go over, because last month we went over most everything listed on the left side here already. Most topics listed on the right side we did not have time to get to, so this is what we'll be focusing on mostly in today's class. Again, if you'd like me to do a bit more review than I plan on doing, feel free to jump in and I'll be happy to jump back a couple steps. To answer a couple obvious questions before we do get started, for those of you who don't take every class with me, my workspace might be set up a little bit different. Highlighted areas in my workspace, the text area, snap to, some other menu items that might come up, are actually presented as what's new. What's new items are shown in CorelDraw, and I keep that actually since X5. So everything since the previous version is highlighted with this pink highlight. So if you're working with the previous version of X5 CorelDraw or Wilcom E2, everything that's highlighted is new and improved in some way. And there's actually a plethora of new features in the new version of E3 Elements 3 with Wilcom. I am a sales rep also, so if any of you are interested in upgrading or have questions with newer versions, again, I can help with that too. Topics for today. Over here on the right, and it says if you have time in the next class, and I'll show you guys the previous class for those of you, I know there's a few of you who did not actually attend that previous class. It was originally the same exact screen, and this is what we ended up with. So quite a bit that we went over with the last class, how to produce quality images, transparencies, gradients, textured effects, overlays, pattern effects, blends. Went over most of the different digital effects that are found over on the left side in CorelDraw in the effects tabs with that previous class. Wilcom does have that previous class as well as I do, so if you want to give me a quick email, I can probably figure a way out to actually send it to you. It's not a small file, but we can probably get it to you in one way or another. So this is the previous class's topic or ending result, and we'll dive in starting from the beginning here with today's class from the boring get-go. Some of these topics we did end up going over with the last class, but we'll go over some of them as a bit of a review as necessary for today's class and go into a lot more detail. Obviously, we brought up Marilyn Monroe in the last class, that type of thing. Digital printing techniques. There is a ton of different digital printing techniques. And to start off right away, describing the difference between RGB, CMYK, bitmaps, JPEGs, TIFFs, those type of things I'd just like to go over with you guys. A typical internet search for choosing images will find a series of different JPEG images off of websites. Most of these, I say, are JPEGs, depending on what you're searching for, because that's the most common way that people still upload images online. A TIFF, T-I-F-F file, is another form of a bitmap or digital pixelated image that you can find on the internet or transferred to you through different graphic services, this type of thing. Both of which, JPEG or or TIFF, is a pixelated image. Much like the Wilcom logo in the upper left with the blue behind it here, as we view in wireframe, you can see it's a pixelated image. At the bottom, we can see it's RGB, red, green, and blue, created this particular image with different blends of red, green, and blue, and the pixelation of that is 217 dots per inch. Now, the particular image itself is only a couple inches wide, about a half an inch tall, so there's not necessarily much more than 217 pixels in this whole area here. So that's what's represented by resolution. When someone says high resolution, they typically mean higher number of pixels, or little tiny square dots, inside of a bitmap image, an image that is mapped by bits, JPEGs and TIFFs. RGB versus CMYK ranges quite differently. Both my Plan B marketing logo in the upper left, as well as the Wilcom logo in the upper right, upper left of the page now are both pixels, pixelated images, bitmaps, shown in the bottom here of Corel, in RGB format. CMYK is another way that graphics can be created in that format. To put it simply, and to describe to everyone who isn't super familiar with pixelated images, CMYK basically adds black to the color spectrum. Cyan, magenta, yellow, black. For most of us that are familiar to at least some degree with digital printing, you realize that cyan, magenta, yellow, and black can basically make up every color in the rainbow, as well as RGB can make up every color in the rainbow. Benefits of CMYK over RGB: giving the black, you have black being represented as a color itself, so it can be added to the spectrum to get really dark, vivid, really depth to the images themselves, the graphics themselves. For those of you who have more advanced digital printers, maybe a Roland or Versa or one of these printers that does additional color spectrums, yes, you can add metallic inks. You can add different additional styles of inks to the spectrum there. Now, in general, though, and I am talking in great generalization here, a bitmap is less of a quality than a vector. A vector line is a perfect line. A vector line has a start and end point with a specific color within it. While it is maybe harder to apply certain digital effects to a vector area, and ultimately, once you have done the same digital effects to that vector area, it is superior. So there's a lot more control that we have over vectors, and that is the direction of the future. Starting off with going over some of the basics here, gradients, transparencies, grids, these type of things. A gradient is what you're seeing on screen behind my text and my page here, both on the left and the right. A gradient is now being applied to our background color, showing a fountain fill, so it's a filled with color. My 8.5 by 11.8, apparently it's a little bit larger than the typical size, page has a fountain color represented in here. By the way, because this is considered intermediate class, maybe even an advanced class in some ways, I do assume a certain knowledge and standpoint of Corel. If I do say anything that's over any of your heads, if you're not quite following, I am more than happy to go back, go over it again, or even answer questions at a later time if you'd like me to go into more detail that way. Again, feel free to ask questions either in the webinar here or send me an email, clayb@planbmarketingaz.com. Fountain fill actually represented there. Very bottom tool inside of CorelDraw is the interactive fill tool, in which I use to give this fountain fill. We have a specific blue color in the lower left, a specific white color in the lower right, and when I adjust the direction of this fountain fill, the start and end point of it, moving around those ends, I can adjust the colors actually being represented in the previous areas selected. One thing to take note, my logo, Plan B, in the upper right-hand corner, is a pixelated image without a transparent background, which means the white background is actually being represented and shown in the graphic. So as I change the direction of the white to the blue, blue to the white, you can see that my logo is not a perfect production-ready logo in some formats. Now, if you're printing with a digital printer that doesn't print white, or white is seen as the background color, then you can see how, okay, this white area can be presented, as just the substrate. But if we were to take a moment, bitmap, trace bitmap, go in here and actually give us a little bit of detail and spend just a few moments to give ourselves a higher quality image here. Let's lower the number of colors. I've just a couple weeks ago I went over bitmap tracing in a course, in our classic CorelDraw training course, which I'm doing now. Now I have a vector image of my logo in black and white. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this is just another reason why vector content will be much more superior than digital content, in that it's easier to edit, easier to customize, and once done, whoop, keep deleting that, and once done so, have a lot more options with a vector image. We'll view in wireframe real quick so you can see my logo here in line art versus a pixelated digital image. All right. Though this class will focus mostly on digital images, I did want to make sure that everyone realizes there's a lot more we can do when working with digital images, like gradients, much like in the background of our page now. I just applied an additional gradient to the logo there, to my logo there. It only applied to the section of my logo that was selected. If I wanted to apply it to the entire logo, I would select logo and either group or weld, two different options. By choosing, when more than one object is selected in CorelDraw, and we choose the first option of these square options up at the top of Corel, the first being weld, it creates everything that is currently selected in one solid layer. This also makes it make sure that that entire layer is grouped into one. So it's much more than just grouping. It is one object now at this point. I applied the digital effect by choosing the bottom tool in Corel, Interactive Fill tool, and simply dragged across my logo to apply the effect. With the Interactive Fill tool, or the gradient, I also have a series of options as far as presets and different directions we can go with this digital image. So I'll zoom in a bit more. Hope I don't make anybody dizzy. I zoom in and out quite a bit. And you can see how my image is actually being applied in a way that is shown from black to white. This is different than a transparency. And with a transparency, the white would literally be see-through, in which case we would see the blue behind it. But with a gradient, it is showing literally going from one color to the next. The defaults being the original color of the graphic, black, and always white next. With the gradients, we can add additional colors by simply dragging colors from any color palette over to the line itself and letting go. So I've added a dark red, a vivid pink to my logo in the center here. We can replace that color by dragging a different color and placing it on top, or by placing a color and placing it again on the line, we can add additional colors. There's no limit to the amount of colors that you can add in a blended color palette to your design. Now, one thing to keep note of when adding these digital effects and outline specific blended colors, I very often recommend applying an outline to the graphics so that you see the original image, and it gives your graphics so much more preciseness when you apply that outline. So I'm going to right-click on red here, and we'll thicken up that outline. So you can see a nice, vivid, bold red outline on going throughout the graphic. Or I can make it dark blue or any color that you specifically like. The outline itself is not adjusted or compared or changed by the gradient that I have within it, as the fountain fill color, shown in the lower right of CorelDraw, is completely separate than the outline color. At least with a gradient effect it is in this case. So there we've applied a very basic digital effect. Yes, most of this is review. Some of you are over there probably yawning right now, but it is very necessary for me to go over these basic effects before we dive into some of these more complicated digital effects. So from this bottom tool, the Interactive Fill tool that we chose, and applied a blend of a series of colors and then an outline, this is a linear type digital effect. There's also a series of presets that we can choose from in the upper left here in CorelDraw. As you can see, what I've done is I've applied now a conical effect inside of Corel. A conical is a half moon or half circle type effect, and I can twist and turn this, as you guys can see. And as applied, white is in a specific direction, black is in a specific direction, so is the blue I added, and that tan brown. There's additional gradient effects that we can add, a square effect, let's say, and you can see the square by the dotted line around the outside of the image here. And we can also change the center point of that square, or the focal point in this case, because it is white, of our digital effect. I'm going to add a lighter color because this is a little bit more difficult to see. There we go. So you can see that square digital effect. I'll bring it in real small so you can see it even more. And this is ultimately a series of effects that the best way to learn it is to simply play with it. If you do have questions specifically, I'm more than happy to answer. And a series of additional digital effects there too. In the previous month's class, we went into a lot more detail in these additional effects here. The only one I'm going to go over real quickly with today's class is a gradient, or excuse me, a transparency effect. So separate from that bitmap, or this particular vector image that I just applied a series of effects, let's take the Wilcom logo that is now vector. I vectorize this, wireframe view. Everyone can see it's a series of vectors. Let's apply a similar digital effect. We'll place it on top of our background so we can actually see what's going on when we do apply that. But this time, I'm going to ungroup, Control-U, the graphic, select just a specific part of it, so let's say the red W in Wilcom. And instead of applying a gradient blended color, we're going to go into our digital effects tools, transparency, and do the same thing. We'll drag across the Wilcom. In this case, you'll see a different type of effect is now applied. It's very similar to the one that I originally showed, but this one literally gives Wilcom a transparent, see-through type effect. Now this effect is possible and usable, for those of you before you ask, with our digital graphics also. So just because my first logo here was a digital image does not mean we cannot apply a transparency. This is a newer series. One of the things that's a little bit better with each version of Corel as it gets better and newer. But transparencies can be applied either way in CorelDraw. There's no need to actually go into Corel Photo Paint or anything like that. So with those topics gone over, let's see, questions. I guess not yet, which means I'm not going too fast, or everyone's content or already knows most of what I showed. Grids are completely different than our typical blends and transparencies, that type of thing. By the way, to turn off any one of these type of digital effects, you will need to select the effect again. And then there's always a red line through the digital effect up at the top, and that's how you'll actually turn that off. With the Wilcom logo selected here, and with the interactive fill tool selected also, we can use our flyout to use a mesh or our grid type interactive effect in this image selected. So with that graphic selected, we'll select and go to grid. Mesh fill. This changes quite a bit when it comes to the type of graphic that we'll actually be showing. And you know what? Let's not dive into this one just yet. We'll get to this in just a bit, because a mesh tool, it changes the whole dynamic of how you're actually working interactively, in that you're not just going from one side to the next with your blended colors, but you're going all throughout the graphic in an infinite number of directions, 2 dimensions, instead of and sometimes even 3-dimension types of effects instead of just 1 or 2. Saving and exporting. This is something that I got several questions after my last class. Yes, it's great to create these graphics in these awesome ways, but what about actually sending them to customers? Was part of what we actually got as a few questions after last month's class. So let's say this graphic on screen that we have on screen right now, we want to send this to a customer as a proof. Possibly we took our logo and we dropped it on a picture of a hat or something, or a t-shirt, or a vinyl sticker type template or something like that to show to the customer. Possibly we just want to show the customer or prospective customer what the graphic looks like. Either way, we have to send a proof to that client. A few different ways to do so: exporting, publishing, and saving. File save, or save as, inside of CorelDraw allows us to save specific graphics to specific locations on our computer. But save as is limited in that it's probably going to only save it in a graphic design format. As a default, we're looking at CorelDraw CDR format, and as a default, X6 or CorelDraw X16 when we do save things in this side of the program. For those of us working in Wilcom, if you go File, Save As, it will actually default make an EMB file, which is a Wilcom file. But that Wilcom file has a CorelDraw file basically inside of it. For those of you who have the newer versions of Wilcom, it does come with a way, and very easily, you can open CorelDraw and work in CorelDraw separately than opening your ES or DS version of Wilcom. So you can work just in CorelDraw and save things exactly as I'm doing so here. But if you have Wilcom open at the same time, it may default to saving as a Wilcom file, an EMB file. Anyways, in CorelDraw, you can save to previous versions, all the way back to, I guess, version 7 with the current version of Corel X16 right now. So if you're sending this graphic design file to another graphic designer and you're okay with them having access to the complete graphic design file, not, you're okay with them, using this artwork in every way, then you can certainly save it or save it back to the version that they have if they're not as current as you may be. There's some new features as far as ratings and such that aren't super necessary in this particular case. Under the Save As type, CorelDraw offers a plethora of additional graphics saving methods, including Adobe Illustrator. So you can actually save an AI file from CorelDraw, and I believe vice versa in the newer versions of Adobe Illustrator also. So there's other rarely used graphic design formats that you can save to here as well. Exporting is different than saving. File, export. Export is actually publishing or saving the graphic file to a specific location as defined, much like Save As, but is doing so in an additional wider variety of graphic design formats. So now we can save as things like EPS file, encapsulated PostScript, which would probably be your most used. One of the major things to keep in mind when saving as and exporting is selected only. If this is checked, then it will only save the object selected. In this case, my logo with the gradients that we've added, if I were to save this graphic now as an encapsulated PostScript. Last way to save a particular graphic and send it to a customer. By the way, either of those ways, once the graphics is saved, you can simply attach or drag and drop to an email, and this counts in Yahoo, Gmail, Outlook, all of the above. You can simply drag the file straight from the location it's saved in that window over to your email and let go. The last way to send a graphic to a client, and the way that I recommend mostly, is to publish to a PDF. I recommend this because it's the most generally accepted format for smart devices also. So whether it be a tablet or a smartphone, and your client gets that proof that you sent them, they can take a quick look and zoom in right on their telephone while they're at their kid's baseball game or whatever. So we're looking at publish to PDF options, in which a few additional tools come up as well. There is no option in publishing to PDF for exporting our digital image or our undigital image, it doesn't matter necessarily in this format, and saving it for selected only. When publishing to PDF, it sees the page size. So the default page size in my CorelDraw here is 8.5 by 11, 8.5 by 11. So it will only save 8.5 by 11. Anything to the outside of that, when I publish to PDF, will not actually be visible in the PDF when saved. Something else to keep in mind is this tab down here at the bottom called Settings. When I click on that Settings option, I have this new window that comes up in which we can change quite a bit about this particular graphic and view any particular issues that it may have also. The one I'd like to highlight on right now is the Security tab. When publishing to PDF and sending a graphic as a proof to a customer, it's very important for you not to give them access to the graphic completely, as they might be able to just forward it to one of your competitors and steal your design time. I mean, you spent hard work or hard money on that graphic or hard time, so you need to be compensated for that. So the client needs to realize that they cannot just take all of those graphics to the next person who just quotes them a nickel less per t-shirt. So in order to do so, the Security tab will allow you to lock this graphic so they can view it, but they will not have access to the artwork. The only way they can actually gain access to the artwork would be to view it and then take a screen capture, which is a lot of extra steps and very difficult to do, and most of your customers, Jane, even most of my customers, would rather not fuss with that. So you can give them open permission, or open password. Requires a password for them to even open the file. For our industry, this is rarely necessary. Permission password, though, might be. You might want to use your middle name or something as a password, confirmation password, and only give them permission to print in low resolution, which I typically do with most of the PDFs that I send. Or give them no permission to print at all. Pretty much the whole reason for locking it is to give them no permission to edit the graphic. So if you give them no permission to edit, they will not be able to bring those graphics or that design into any graphic design software without the password that you apply. So some quick tips, very useful for exporting and bringing your graphics out of the version that you particularly have and spent time working on. Let's see if any questions have come up. Not too many. Looks like I've already answered them anyways. Okay, cool. Power clipping, and then we can get into some of these more in-depth graphics also and effects. Power clipping is an effect in which you're placing an object inside of another object. For example, we might take a graphic and want, let's say, my logo that we just did in this crazy yellow color here to be represented inside of another logo, like the Wilcom logo. In X6, it's represented very easily, in which you can just drag and drop with your right mouse click to place an object inside, power clip inside, and it's done so automatically. Not only with X6 is it done so automatically, but it also gives us these little automatic buttons at the bottom to extract, extrude, or edit the particular graphic with just a quick button on the inside. Just reason number 700 to upgrade to X6. It's awesome. In which case we can reposition, we can edit, we can change colors. Oh, you know what, we don't like the yellow. Let's go back to that lighter blue or something. I don't know. Anyways, while finishing, you can simply click on the button below and it finishes the edit of that power clipped image. Power clip it in the manual or old school way, or for those of us who don't have the newest version of CorelDraw, it's a little bit more in depth. So let's take the Wilcom logo here again. We'll duplicate it, bring it over to the side, and I'm going to weld it all to one big solid layer. So we have our Wilcom text from the Wilcom logo here, and we want to place something cool inside this text. And I'll get to outlining here in just a second. I will review that. This isn't the best bitmap to vector trace for those of you who are going, oh, that's not good. But for our power clipping example, it'll work just fine. Let's take a cool image. Let's go to the internet. I did a quick internet search of families. We're going to use this particular graphic here in a bit. Actually, it doesn't matter which one. View original image. I just did a Google search for families on the beach. I just wanted a digital image that was a lot more complicated than your typical digital image, so I chose a photograph. So here we go. It's a complicated digital image that possibly we want to place inside of our Wilcom. So in order to do so, the little bit more old school way, I will take our original image, go up to Effects, go down to Power Clip, Place Inside Frame. It'll say Container with previous versions of Corel. You simply point to the area in which you'd like it to go, and the graphic places inside. Because I am in X6, I have all these cool little features over here that I can automatically click on. If you're not in X6, you can right-click on the image to start to extract the graphic or to edit the graphic and work with it in many different ways this way too. So let's say we wanted to make sure the family was visible in the text. We could still see the beach, so we might shrink it down. Let's say we'll position it more like that. We'll right-click when we're finished and finish editing so that we can see it there. Very often with many of these digital effects, including power clipping, I highly recommend, selecting the image. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's true. placing a nice outline on it, and I'll thicken that up a bit so we can see it, so that you can identify the edge so it doesn't just blend in with the substrate. It really makes the graphics pop when you can just show a quick outline to distinguish the difference between foreground and background, that type of thing. Now I've exaggerated it a bit there, but I think you guys get the idea. So power clipping, blending of colors, transparencies, as well as I reviewed some of and explained some of the other grids, gradients, RGBs, and different internet posting formats of graphics there. Next on this list was Marilyn Monroe. We obviously used Marilyn Monroe last month, so I may as well just click on that page and go back to that particular topic. So with Marilyn, I did show a few things. We did an outline last month, an outline that actually is a separate object so that we can apply a specific color to it. I chose a color with my eyedropper tool that I took actually from the background behind Marilyn here, so that it makes the graphic just more conducive and with the actual digital original photograph itself. We did not spend too much time on cutting, cropping, and erasing though, so we're going to do that here with today's class. So I'll choose Marilyn, copy, place her back on today's page of graphics, and we'll work with Marilyn over here. So let's say there's specific things that we'd like to do with this particular digital image of Marilyn, in that we need to crop it, or we just want her face, or just her eyes, or just the back, parts of her, not the background. Very often clients give us ragtag photographs or digital scans or these type of things, and they only need parts of it. So again, this might be a review. It's kind of a beginner intermediate level, but it's necessary before we get into some of the advanced stuff. And by the way, we will go into the 45-minute realm instead of the 35-minute realm with today's class. The third tool down in CorelDraw is the crop tool. This allows us to crop out specific areas of any given image. The crop tool is as the default with any object selected. So the photograph of Marilyn is selected. I simply draw a square with that tool in the area that I'd like to keep, and then double click within the area. Everything else of that object disappears. Keep in mind, if no object is selected, so I've clicked off the side of Marilyn, then chosen my crop tool, and let's say I just want this part of Marilyn, double click, everything, and I do mean everything else, disappears in the entire graphic page if nothing is selected. So this is the number one mistake when coming to cropping and erasing. The eraser tool acts very similarly. I select the eraser tool. My defaults are up here again. I can press the up arrow on my keyboard to increase the size, or I can press the up arrow here to increase the size of the eraser also. For those of you who are familiar with the eraser tool and complain, oh, I can't erase that, oh, I can't erase that, it's because the object is not selected. Again, we must first click once to select the object, or before the eraser tool is selected, simply choose it with our pick tool. Now that it is selected, we can erase specific parts of the graphic with our eraser tool. Another thing to keep in mind with the eraser tool, if you were to mess up and go way over to the side and erase something you thought you didn't want to, so for example, let's go place Marilyn here. Marilyn is selected, eraser tool, and I erase, oh no, I dragged over to the Wilcom area. It doesn't matter if I erase over here. The only thing that will erase is the part of the object that is selected. If I click once on the Wilcom design, I can erase that, as you can see. Go back a couple steps there with Control-Z, but it must be selected. Now the knife tool acts a little bit differently than both the eraser tool and the crop tool. The knife tool, with the flyout here, requires you to give a specific start and end point through an image. So let's say we started at the edge of Marilyn here, and the knife will stand up when it's okay to cut. And then when it's okay to cut on the edge on the other end, it will stand up again, and I will click again. Once I've clicked, Marilyn is now 2 pieces. So it literally is like taking a knife and slicing through the image. The thickness of the cut is typically next to nothing. As I've zoomed in quite a bit here, you can all see that it's, don't worry about the depth of the knife. Rarely will that ever even matter anyways. So knife tools allow us to customize even more of our digital images and do some cropping, that type of thing. Color mask is a different story altogether. So I'm going to take Marilyn. Actually, let's paste Marilyn once more. And I'll take these additional images to show how and why color masking is good and bad. Color masking is an excellent, excellent tool in many ways. Paste. But can become a major pain if you need specifics. And I use that as just a general word, specifics. So Google search, FedEx logo, view original image. So I'm taking a logo, an image that's obviously has very distinct and very specific start and end points to its graphics, its graphic and its design and its colors. So the FedEx logo, paste, I will place over here. And just so that we can see it for the sake of argument, I'm going to stretch out the background color of our page so that you can see FedEx there in a little bit more detail. Alright, so FedEx itself is an excellent example of when we might want to keep an image as a digital image, but remove one specific color from the graphic. So under bitmaps, we have a tool called Bitmap Color Mask, in which a new window opens on the right side of our CorelDraw and allows us to choose one or multiple colors to remove. I'll use the eyedropper for right now to select white, and white is now selected as the first color here, to remove and from the graphic selected. Again, FedEx logo was selected first, so it's only going to apply to the FedEx logo that was selected. You will need to adjust the tolerance or the amount of white that you'd like to remove. In this particular graphic, we can remove 90, 100%, and it doesn't much matter because everything that's white we are fine with apply, removing. In fact, we can even increase it even more because I see a bit of white around the text that I'd like gone. So now 100% of the color white in this digital image is gone. Kind of neat. In other circumstances, it's not the greatest tool. Something else as a side note to point out, this graphic of this family looked great with a white background as the edges looked like they were just kind of like scribbled out and erased. But again, as you print on an actual image or substrate color, it's still just a square pixelated bitmap with an effect, an edge effect is what it would be called, around the edge of it. So let's say we wanted to remove a specific color. Let's say we wanted to remove, I don't know, the blue ocean, for example. Take our eyedropper, we'll go over to the ocean, choose a specific color, and click on Apply. Whoa, that looks terrible. So this would be an example of when not to use the actual color masking graphic. Now with this family, I mean, I guess technically we could remove everything that's brown, but in, like the sand, but the brown and the sand might be in the skin tone, so this can cause a problem with removing one specific color also. The father's shirt might be a similar color to the mom's shirt or the background or the sky or the ocean, so it's very difficult to choose one specific color and remove it. With Marilyn, on the other hand, with her particular image, I can see that there is a series of specifics or contrasts or that can be applied. For example, the only thing that's even close to being red in this entire graphic is Marilyn's lips. So we may choose the eyedropper, click on the lips, we have the red chosen there. Now I don't want to remove 100% of red because there's a little bit of shading of red in her wrist perhaps, or her cheeks. So we might only do like a 30% or something, but remove red from this design. We can add additional color layer later without without actually using the eraser tool. Now with Marilyn, it would probably just be better to use the eraser tool, and I think everybody agrees with that. But you can see we can get much more specific depending on the graphic and how you apply the bitmap color mask tool. Maybe her eyes, I don't know. It's probably the only thing that's blue. Might be a better example. Eyedropper, blue, apply, okay. Anyways, we're starting to get the idea there with the color mask tool. So many of my clients try to color mask everything, and you just can't do that. It's not an option. It's good for logos, not photographs. Starting to get to the end of the class today. Let's see what we didn't have time to go over. Color masking, Corel Photo Paint, Cutout Lab, and color editing. I'm not going to dive into those little bit more advanced digital techniques. We will save that for, you know what, I can actually relate that to later this month, the CorelDraw class itself. And we will bridge half of that class into Corel Paint. As seen on my desktop, CorelDraw is just a part of the Corel graphics suite that you guys get when purchasing Wilcom or Corel GIS graphics suite. There's also Corel Photo Paint. There's also Corel Capture, Font Navigator, Corel Connect, some of which are great, some of which aren't super awesome. I'm going to take a moment to review the questions to make sure I got to all of them. And please feel free to ask any additional questions, something that I may have went too fast on now before we close the class. And I do promise with the class on the 22nd, at least sign up for it, even if you can't make it, because you'll get the recorded webinar. I'll go into a little bit more depth with using Corel Paint. Hold on a second. Thanks everyone again for your time. I will discontinue the recording of this class here in just a bit. Again, my name's Clay. Very happy to answer any questions. Email is clayb@planbmarketingaz.com. Phone number is 928-282-2069 to our office. We do personalized one-on-one training just like today, but very specific to your business, your questions, and building your company, and custom graphic design services. Thanks again. Give me just a second to review these questions. I'll be back in just a sec.